The scrub brush bit into Eleanor Kathleen Walsh's palms as she worked the coarse bristles across the plank floor, her knees aching against the rough wood despite the thin fabric of her worn dress serving as the only barrier between skin and splinters. She had been at this for 3 hours now, working her way across the trading post main room, and her back screamed with each forward motion, each circular scrub that sent dirty water sloshing in waves across the boards. The September sun of 1872 beat down through the windows of the remote mountain outpost, and sweat dripped from her brow to mingle with the soap and grime below her. She had not expected her life to come to this when she left Independence, Missouri 6 months ago, but desperation had a way of stripping away pride and leaving only survival in its wake. Her father had died of fever that spring, her mother 2 years before that, and the debts he left behind were enough to take at their small house and everything in it. She had been 19 years old with no family, no prospects, and no options except to accept the position as housekeeper to a trader named Silas Carmichael, who ran a post near Wasco, California, where the foothills met the Sierra Nevada mountains. Carmichael had seemed respectable enough in his letters, businesslike and formal, promising fair wages and modest accommodations. The reality had been altogether different. He was a cruel man with a fondness for whiskey and a temper that flared without warning. The wages he had promised never materialized, always delayed by some excuse or another, and the work he demanded was endless. She scrubbed and cooked and hauled water from dawn until long after dark, and still he found fault with everything she did. "You missed a spot," he would say, kicking over her bucket of clean water just to watch her scramble to clean up the mess. Start over. She had nowhere else to go, no money to buy passage anywhere, and no family to take her in. The nearest town of any real size was 2 days' ride away, and she had no horse. She was trapped, and Carmichael knew it. The door to the trading post banged open, and Eleanor flinched, expecting Carmichael's heavy footsteps and slurred voice. Instead, she heard the sound of boots that moved with purpose and weight, a different cadence altogether. She kept her head down and continued scrubbing, not daring to look up. Customers were not her concern unless Carmichael specifically called for her to fetch something. Carmichael around? The voice was deep, rough as gravel, but there was something in it that made her pause despite herself. It was not the voice of a man who expected to be denied anything. She risked a glance upward and felt her breath catch in her throat. The man standing just inside the doorway was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the frame. His hair was dark brown, falling past his collar in waves that suggested it had been a long time since he had seen a barber, and his face was weathered by sun and wind and hard living. But it was his eyes that held her, pale blue and sharp, taking in everything about the room in a single sweep before settling on her kneeling form. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful build beneath, all muscle and strength earned through years of hard labor in unforgiving terrain. A hunting knife hung at his belt, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had faced down bears and survived winters that would kill lesser men. "I asked you a question," he said, but his tone was not unkind. "Is Carmichael here?" Eleanor found her voice, though it came out smaller than she would have liked. "He is in the back room. He is conducting inventory. Shall I fetch him for you?" The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her, and she became acutely aware of how she must look, on her knees in dirty water with her hair falling out of its pins and her dress soaked through in places. She saw his gaze travel from her face to her reddened hands still gripping the scrub brush, then to the bucket of filthy water beside her. "How long you been scrubbing that floor?" he asked. The question surprised her. 3 hours, sir. Maybe a bit more." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite name. "You do this every day?" She did not understand why he was asking, but she answered honestly. "Every other day. The floor, I mean. There is always something that needs scrubbing." He made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a sigh. "You get paid for this work?" Now she hesitated. Loyalty to Carmichael, even a cruel employer, warred with the truth. But something about this stranger made her want to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the weight she had been carrying alone. "I was promised wages, sir, but they have not yet materialized. Mr. Carmichael says he will pay me when business improves." The man's jaw tightened, and she saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. "Business improves, that is what he tells you." Before she could respond, Carmichael himself emerged from the back room, his thin face flushing when he saw who stood in his trading post. "Owen Isaac, I did not expect to see you down from your mountain this early in the season. You usually do not come for supplies until first snow threatens." Owen Isaac. Eleanor filed the name away, still clutching her scrub brush like it might protect her from whatever was about to unfold. Owen did not return Carmichael's forced cheerfulness. I need powder and shot, coffee and salt, flour if you have any worth buying. Carmichael rubbed his hands together, already calculating profits. Of course, I have everything you need. Fine quality, all of it. His eyes slid to Eleanor, still on her knees. Girl, get up and fetch Mr. Isaac some coffee while I gather his supplies. Eleanor started to rise, her knees protesting after so long in one position, but before she could get her feet fully under her, Owen Isaac crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hand, calloused and huge, wrapped around her upper arm and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. The moment her feet touched the floor, he released her arm but did not step back. Instead, he looked down at her with those pale blue eyes, and spoke words that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the trading post. Never again. Eleanor blinked, confusion washing over her. Sir? Never again, he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You will never scrub another floor on your knees. Not for him, not for anyone. Carmichael sputtered from behind the counter. Now see here, Isaac, the girl is my employee. How I manage my household is none of your concern. Owen turned his head slowly to look at Carmichael, and Eleanor saw the trader actually take a step backward. Your employee, you pay her then? Regular wages, in coin or script? Carmichael's face went from red to pale. That is between me and the girl, that would be a no then. Owen's voice dropped even lower, taking on a dangerous edge. Which makes her not your employee. Makes her something else entirely. Something I do not tolerate in these mountains. I am not running any kind of illegal operation here, Carmichael protested, but his voice shook. She has room and board. That is worth something. Room and board for 18 hours of labor a day? Owen's hand had drifted to the knife at his belt, though he had not drawn it. You know what they call that everywhere else, Carmichael? They call that slavery, and we fought a war over it not 10 years back. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She had thought these things herself, late at night when exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, but she had never dared speak them aloud. Hearing this mountain man say them, giving voice to her suffering, made something crack open inside her chest. Carmichael's eyes darted between Owen and Eleanor. She is free to leave any time she wants. I am not holding her prisoner. Free to leave and go where? Owen asked. With what money? On what horse? To what destination? He shook his head. You have been running a neat little game here, Carmichael, bringing desperate folks out to the middle of nowhere and working them until they drop. I heard about the last girl who worked for you. Found her way to Sacramento eventually, half-starved and telling stories about this place. Eleanor had not known there was another girl before her. The knowledge settled like a stone in her stomach. Carmichael's hand disappeared beneath the counter, and Eleanor knew he kept a shotgun there. But Owen saw it too, and his own hand clamped down on Carmichael's wrist before the trader could bring the weapon up. I would not, Owen said softly, and there was more threat in those 3 quiet words than in all of Carmichael's bluster. I came here for supplies, and I will pay fair price for them. Then I am leaving, and the girl is coming with me. You can accept that peaceful like, or we can do this another way. Your choice. Carmichael jerked his hand free, and Eleanor saw the calculation in his eyes. Owen Isaac was bigger, stronger, and clearly unafraid. Carmichael was many things, but he was not brave. Fine, he spat. Take her. She was more trouble than she was worth anyway. But she owes me for 6 months of room and board. Owen laughed, a sound without humor. She owes you nothing. She has worked off any debt 10 times over. Now get my supplies together before I decide you owe her compensation for her labor. Carmichael moved with jerky, angry motions, pulling down sacks of flour and coffee, weighing out powder and shot. Eleanor stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Was she really leaving? With this stranger, this mountain man who had appeared like something out of a story? Owen turned back to her, and his expression softened slightly. You have belongings? Anything you need to gather? She nodded mutely. Her possessions amounted to almost nothing. 2 spare dresses, a brush, a small bag of personal items. Everything had fit into the carpet bag she had brought from Missouri, and she had never unpacked it entirely. Some part of her always hoping she might leave this place. Go get them, Owen said. Be quick. Eleanor hurried to the tiny room off the kitchen where she slept, little more than a closet with a cot. Her hands shook as she stuffed her few belongings into the carpet bag. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Where was he taking her? What did he want from her? She knew nothing about Owen Isaac, except that he lived somewhere in the mountains, and that he had just stood up to Carmichael on her behalf. That took a kind of courage she had not seen in months. But he was still a stranger, and she was about to go off into the wilderness with him. The alternative was staying here, returning to her knees on that floor, scrubbing until her hands bled and her back gave out. When she looked at it that way, the choice became clear. She emerged from her room with her carpet bag to find Owen had already loaded his supplies onto a pack mule that waited outside. He was counting out coins onto Carmichael's counter, his face expressionless. "This squares us," Owen said. "You have any complaint about that? You can take it up with the marshal in Wasco next time you are in town. I am sure he would be real interested to hear about your labor practices." Carmichael said nothing, just swept the coins into his cash box with trembling hands. Owen turned to Eleanor. "You ride?" "A little," she admitted. "It has been a while." He nodded and stepped outside, and she followed him into the afternoon sun. 2 horses were tied to the rail, both of them sturdy mountain ponies built for rough terrain. Owen secured her carpet bag to the pack mule, then turned to the smaller of the 2 horses, a dappled gray mare. "This is Juniper," he said, stroking the mare's neck. "She has a gentle disposition and a steady gait. She will take care of you." He helped Eleanor into the saddle, his hand steadying her as she found her seat. She had not ridden in over a year, and the height felt dizzying for a moment. But Juniper stood patient and calm beneath her, and Eleanor felt some of her nervousness ease. Owen mounted his own horse, a large buckskin gelding that matched its rider's powerful build. He gathered the pack mule's laid rope and looked at Eleanor. "We have about 3 hours of daylight left. My cabin is 2 hours north, up in the high country. We will get there before full dark if we keep a steady pace. You up for that?" Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. They rode away from the trading post without looking back, and Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest with each step that carried her farther from that place. She watched Owen's broad back ahead of her, the easy way he sat his horse, the alertness in how he scanned their surroundings. This was a man at home in the wilderness, comfortable in his own skin in a way she had never seen before. The trail began to climb almost immediately, winding through pines and aspens that whispered in the breeze. The air grew cooler and cleaner, carrying the scent of resin and earth. Eleanor had spent the last 6 months seeing nothing but the inside of Carmichael's trading post, and the beauty of the mountain struck her with unexpected force. Tears pricked at her eyes, though whether from relief or delayed fear or simple exhaustion, she could not say. After perhaps an hour of steady climbing, Owen slowed his horse until Eleanor drew alongside him. The trail had widened here, following a ridgeline that offered views of the valley below. "You holding up all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said, and was surprised to find it true. Her body ached, but it was a different kind of ache than the grinding exhaustion of Carmichael's endless work. This was the honest tiredness of muscles put to proper use. Owen studied her for a moment. "I should tell you what you are getting into. My cabin is remote. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and I do not see him more than once a month. I trap and hunt for my living, sell pelts and meat down in Wasco a few times a year. It is a hard life, but it is an honest one. I do not cheat, and I do not lie, and I do not hold with any man or woman being treated the way Carmichael was treating you." Eleanor absorbed this. "Why did you take me with you?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because I saw you on your knees scrubbing that bastard's floor, and something in me just knew I could not walk away and leave you there. Maybe that makes me a fool. Maybe I should have minded my own business. But I did not, and here we are." "Here we are," Eleanor echoed softly. "I will not lie to you," Owen continued. "I am taking you to my cabin because I do not have anywhere else to take you right now. When the snow melts next spring, if you want to go to Wasco or Sacramento or anywhere else, I will take you there myself and give you enough money to make a fresh start. But for the winter, you will be stuck with me. I can promise you clean work, fair treatment, and your own space. I will not lay a hand on you except in respect. You have my word on that." Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. "What kind of work?" "Cooking mostly. I am a terrible cook. Mending if you know how. Helping me prepare pelts for market. Nothing that will break your back or your spirit. I will pay you wages, real wages in coin. $20 a month plus room and board. That is more than fair for this territory. $20 a month. Eleanor's breath caught. That was more money than she had seen in her entire life. In 6 months she could save enough to go anywhere, do anything. "Why would you pay me so much?" she asked. Suspicion rising. Despite herself, Owen glanced at her, and she saw something like understanding in his eyes. "Because I can afford it, and because your labor is worth it. A good camp cook is worth their weight in gold in these mountains. Plus, it is going to be a long winter, and I would rather spend it with someone who does not hate me. Fair wages tend to prevent that kind of resentment." It made a kind of sense that Carmichael's manipulations never had. Eleanor took a breath and made her decision. "All right, I will work for you through the winter, and I will take you up on that offer to help me get settled somewhere come spring." "Fair enough." Owen extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Eleanor shook it. His grip was firm but careful, and she felt the calluses on his palm that spoke of hard work and harder living. They rode on as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The trail grew steeper, and conversation fell away as they focused on the climb. Eleanor's legs ached from gripping the saddle, and her hands cramped from holding the reins, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. She had endured far worse than a 2-hour ride. The cabin appeared suddenly as they crested a rise, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was larger than Eleanor had expected. Built from solid logs chinked with clay and moss, a stone chimney rose from one end and a covered porch ran along the front. A small barn stood nearby, along with what looked like a smokehouse and a shed. Owen dismounted and came to help Eleanor down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow until she found her balance. "First time in a saddle in a while always hits hard," he said. "You will feel it tomorrow, but it gets easier." He led the horses to the barn while Eleanor stood in the clearing, looking around. The cabin sat on a shelf of land that offered sweeping views of the valley below and the mountains beyond. A stream ran somewhere nearby. She could hear the music of it over stones. The air was thin and clean, and the silence was profound after months of Carmichael's constant complaints and demands. Owen returned and picked up her carpet bag. "Come on, I will show you the cabin." The interior was dim after the brightness outside, but as her eyes adjusted, Eleanor saw that it was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's home. The main room held a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, shelves lined with supplies and books, and a comfortable-looking armchair near the hearth. A ladder led to a loft above, and 2 doors opened off the main room. Owen set her bag down and gestured to one of the doors. "That is my room. This one," he opened the other door, "is yours." Eleanor stepped into a small but clean room containing a real bed with a straw-tick mattress, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple, but it was private and clean and hers. She felt tears threatening again and blinked them back hard. "The outhouse is behind the cabin," Owen said from the doorway. "There is a rain barrel on the side of the house for washing water, and the stream is about 50 yards east through those trees. Water there is clean and cold year-round. I will get a fire going and heat some water for you if you want to wash up before supper." "Thank you," Eleanor managed, "for all of this." Owen shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You do not need to thank me for treating you like a human being. That should be the baseline, not something special." He paused. "I am going to tend to the animals and bring in some firewood. Make yourself at home. There is bread and cheese in the larder if you are hungry." He left her then, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Eleanor sat down on the bed and finally allowed herself to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body, but they were not tears of despair or fear. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope that maybe, just maybe, her luck had finally turned. When she had cried herself out, she washed her face in the basin on the washstand and unpacked her meager belongings. Her 2 spare dresses went into the chest of drawers, her brush and few toiletries on the washstand. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped in a handkerchief, was the only thing of value she owned, a small silver locket that had belonged to her mother. She placed it carefully on the chest of drawers where she could see it. Eleanor emerged from her room to find Owen had indeed built up the fire and a pot of water was heating on a hook over the flames. He was slicing bread at the table, the knife small in his large hands. "There is soap in that basket there," he said without looking up, "and clean towels on the shelf. The water should be hot enough now if you want to take it to your room." Eleanor realized he was offering her privacy to wash properly, something she had not had in months. "Thank you," she said again, knowing the words were inadequate but having nothing else to offer. She carried the pot of hot water to her room along with soap and towels, and for the first time in half a year she stripped off her filthy dress and scrubbed herself clean from head to toe. The hot water was a luxury almost painful in its pleasure, washing away not just dirt, but some of the taint of her time at the trading post. When she emerged in her cleanest dress with her hair brushed and pinned properly, she found Owen had set out a simple meal of bread, cheese, cold venison, and apples. He had changed his own shirt and looked slightly less travel-worn. They ate in silence at first, Eleanor discovering she was ravenous. The food was simple but good, and she found herself eating more than she had in weeks. Carmichael had kept her on short rations, claiming food was expensive and she needed to earn her keep before she could eat her fill. "You can ask me questions if you want," Owen said eventually. "I imagine you have some." Eleanor did. "How old are you?" 28. "You?" 19. "Almost 20. He nodded as though this confirmed something. "How did you end up working for Carmichael?" She told him the story, about her father's death and the debts and the advertisement she had seen for a housekeeper position in California. It seemed like a chance to start over, she finished. I was naive. You were desperate, Owen corrected. There is a difference. Carmichael preys on desperate people. You are not the first, and you probably would not have been the last if word had not started getting out about his practices. How long have you lived up here? Eleanor asked. 5 years. I came west after the war, tried my hand at farming down in the valley, but it did not take. I am not cut out for that kind of life, all schedules and neighbors and civilization. Up here I answer to nobody but myself and the seasons. It suits me. Do you get lonely? The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it, his blue eyes distant. Sometimes, but I get lonely around people too, in a different way. At least up here the loneliness is honest. Eleanor thought she understood what he meant. She had been surrounded by people in Missouri and still felt desperately alone after her father died. What about you? Owen asked. What did you do before all this? I helped my father run a boarding house, nothing fancy, just rooms for travelers and working men. I cooked and cleaned and kept the books. After my mother died, it was just the two of us running it. She paused. I was good at it. The work, I mean. I liked making a place comfortable for people, liked the routine of it. You will be good at the work here then, Owen said. It is not so different, just smaller scale and rougher conditions. Over the next week, they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Eleanor woke with the sun and started the fire, then prepared breakfast while Owen saw to the animals. They ate together, then he would head out to check his trap lines while she cleaned up and started whatever tasks the day required. Laundry, mending, preparing vegetables from the root cellar, baking bread in the Dutch oven. Owen had not exaggerated his lack of cooking skills. The man could bring down an elk at 200 yards and skin it perfectly, but give him flour and water and he would somehow produce something inedible. Eleanor took over all meal preparation with relief, finding joy in creating proper food again. The work was hard but satisfying. Owen treated her with unfailing courtesy, never raising his voice or making unreasonable demands. If she told him something needed doing, he did it without complaint. If she needed help lifting something heavy, he appeared as though summoned. She began to notice things about him. The way he moved with careful economy, nothing wasted or hurried. The gentleness in his hands when he handled injured animals or did fine work on his equipment. The intelligence in his eyes when they talked in the evenings by the fire, discussing books from his surprisingly extensive collection, or debating the merits of various hunting strategies. He had a quiet sense of humor that emerged gradually, dry observations that caught her off guard and made her laugh. She had not laughed in so long that the first time it happened she actually clapped her hand over her mouth in surprise. Owen had looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. What is wrong? Nothing. I just forgot what laughing felt like. Something had shifted in his expression then, a softness that made her breath catch. You should laugh more, it suits you. The first snow came in early October, just a dusting that melted by midday but signaled the changing season. Owen began bringing in more firewood, stacking it under the porch until they had enough to last through a siege. He showed Eleanor how to cure meat in the smokehouse, how to pack vegetables in sand to keep them fresh through winter, how to render fat for candles and soap. She proved an apt student and he proved a patient teacher. Sometimes their hands would brush as he demonstrated a technique, and Eleanor would feel a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with the work. She began to notice the strength in his forearms as he worked, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he bent over a task, the rare smile that transformed his weathered face into something approaching handsome. She told herself it was simple gratitude, natural affection for someone who had rescued her from a bad situation. But late at night in her room, listening to the wind in the pines, she knew it was becoming something more. One evening in mid-October, they sat by the fire after supper, Eleanor mending one of Owen's shirts while he worked on a new leather sheath for his hunting knife. The silence between them had become comfortable, no longer needing to be filled with constant conversation. You ever think about getting married? Eleanor asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too forward, but Owen did not seem bothered. I used to. Before I came out here, there was a girl back in Ohio before the war. We had an understanding, or I thought we did. While I was off fighting, she found someone else, someone who had not been changed by what he saw and did. He shrugged. I do not blame her. I was not the same man who left. I am sorry, Eleanor said softly. Do not be. It was a long time ago and I have made my peace with it. Besides, what woman would want to live up here, miles from anywhere, married to a man who spends half his time alone in the woods? He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Someone who values honesty and kindness, Eleanor heard herself say. someone who understands that there are different kinds of wealth than money and society. Owen looked up at her, and their eyes met across the firelight. The moment stretched, charged with something Eleanor could not name but felt in every fiber of her being. "What about you?" Owen asked, his voice rougher than usual. "You think about marriage? I used to assume it would happen eventually. But after my father died and I had to make my own way, I realized I wanted more than just any marriage. I wanted a partnership, someone who saw me as an equal, not property or free labor." She thought of Carmichael and shuddered. "Someone who treats me with respect. You deserve that," Owen said. "You deserve someone who sees how strong you are, how capable. Someone who appreciates your laugh and your sharp mind and the way you make the best biscuits I have ever tasted." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "You are very kind." "I am not kind, I am honest." He set down the knife and sheath. "Kathleen, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "All right. When I saw you on your knees scrubbing that floor, something happened. I cannot fully explain it, but it was like recognition. Like I had been looking for something without knowing what it was, and suddenly there it was right in front of me." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling for words. "I know it has only been a few weeks. I know you have been through hell and you need time to heal and find your footing again. But I need you to know that having you here has changed everything. This cabin is not just a place I survive anymore. It has become a home." Eleanor set down her mending with trembling hands. "Owen, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. I will keep my promise. Come spring, if you want to leave, I will help you. But if you wanted to stay, if you thought maybe there could be something between us worth exploring, I would like that very much." She stood, and he did the same, and suddenly the space between them felt charged like the air before a lightning strike. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This thing between us. It scares me because it is so fast, so unexpected. But it is there and I do not think I can ignore it anymore." Owen took a step toward her, then stopped, giving her space to retreat if she wanted. But Eleanor did not retreat. Instead, she closed the distance between them and placed her hand on his chest, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart under her palm. "I am not afraid of you," she said. "I want you to know that. I trust you in a way I have not trusted anyone in a very long time." His hand came up to cover hers, dwarfing it. "I will never give you reason to regret that trust. I swear it." They stood like that for a long moment, learning each other's closeness, before Owen gently pulled back. "It is late. You should get some sleep." Eleanor nodded, though part of her wanted to stay right where she was. But he was right. They had time. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she had time and safety and the space to let something grow naturally. She went to her room and lay in bed, her hand still tingling from where it had pressed against his chest. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, and the wind whispered through the pines. And Eleanor smiled into her pillow like a girl with a secret. The next morning dawned cold and clear, and Eleanor woke to find frost patterns on her window. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Owen already had the fire built up and coffee brewing. "Morning," he said, and his smile was warmer than it had been before, more open. "Good morning." She busied herself with breakfast, aware of his eyes on her as she moved around the cabin. After they ate, Owen announced he needed to check his northern trap line, which would take most of the day. "There is fresh snow up high. Good tracking weather. I should be back by supper time." Eleanor watched him prepare, checking his rifle, packing supplies into a rucksack. She felt an unexpected pang at the thought of him being gone all day, which was ridiculous. He had been going out on trap lines since she arrived. But something had shifted between them last night, and now his absence felt different. "Be careful," she said as he headed for the door. He paused and looked back at her. "Always am." "You will be all right here?" "Of course. I have plenty to keep me busy." After he left, Eleanor threw herself into work. She had been meaning to give the cabin a proper deep clean, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. But as she swept and scrubbed and organized, she was acutely aware that this was different from the desperate, fearful cleaning she had done at Carmichael's. This was taking care of a home, making it better for both of them. She found herself humming as she worked, old songs her mother used to sing. The cabin had good light from its windows, and the view of the mountains was spectacular. She could see why Owen had chosen this spot. In the afternoon, she decided to make something special for supper. There was a haunch of venison in the cold cellar, and she had been hoarding some dried apples and herbs. She set to work on a proper stew, letting it simmer slowly so the flavors would meld. She was just taking fresh bread from the Dutch oven when she heard a horse approaching. Her heart lifted, but when she looked out the window, it was not Owen's buckskin she saw. It was a different horse entirely, and the man riding it was a stranger. Eleanor felt a flutter of nervousness as the man dismounted and approached the cabin. He was young, perhaps 25, with a cocky swagger to his walk that immediately put her on guard. She opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking entrance. "Help you?" she asked. The man's eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well, now I did not know Owen Isaac had himself a wife. Or are you just keeping his bed warm?" Eleanor felt anger surge through her. "I am his employee. What is your business here?" "Employee." The man drew out the word, making it sound dirty. "That what they are calling it these days. I am looking for Owen. He around? He is out checking his trap lines. He will not be back until evening." The man spat into the dirt. "Damn, I was hoping to catch him. Name is Jake Morrison. I trap the territory west of here. Owen and I sometimes trade supplies." Eleanor recognized the name. Owen had mentioned Morrison once or twice, always with a certain wariness. "I will tell him you came by." Morrison made no move to leave. Instead, he leaned against the porch post, eyes still roaming over her in a way that made her want to slam the door. "You do not sound like you are from around here. Where did Owen find you? That is none of your business. Now if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She started to close the door, but Morrison put his boot in the way. "Now that is not very friendly. I rode a long way. Least you could do is offer me some coffee." Eleanor's heart began to pound, but she kept her voice steady. "Remove your foot from my door." "Your door? Thought you said you were just the help." Morrison's smile was ugly. "Come on, girl, no need to be unfriendly. Owen is not here to see what we get up to." This was wrong, all wrong. Eleanor knew men like Morrison, had dealt with them at the boarding house when her father was alive. Bullies who pushed until someone pushed back. She took a deep breath and stepped back, and Morrison took it as invitation, pushing the door open and stepping inside. "That is more like it," he said. Eleanor walked to the fireplace and picked up the poker, turning to face him with the iron rod held firmly in both hands. "Get out now." Morrison's eyes widened, then he laughed. "You going to hit me with that?" "If I have to." They stood frozen for a moment, and Eleanor saw him calculating. He was bigger and stronger, but she had a weapon and the will to use it. The question was whether he was willing to risk getting his head cracked open. The sound of hoofbeats saved them both from finding out. Morrison heard it too and stepped back from Eleanor, hands raised in mock surrender. "No need to get violent. I was just being friendly." Owen appeared in the doorway, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He took in the scene instantly. Eleanor with the poker, Morrison too far inside the cabin, the tension crackling in the air. "Morrison." Owen's voice was flat, dangerous. "What are you doing in my cabin?" "Just paying a friendly visit. Your girl here got the wrong idea." Morrison tried to sound casual, but Eleanor heard the fear underneath. Owen looked at Eleanor. "He hurt you?" "No. He propositioned me and would not leave when I asked." Owen moved so fast Morrison barely had time to flinch before he was hauled up by his shirt front and slammed against the wall. "You came into my home and threatened my woman?" "I did not threaten nobody. Just a misunderstanding." "Get on your horse and ride," Owen said, his voice deadly calm. "If I see you on my land again, I will shoot you for trespassing. If I hear you have been spreading talk about Kathleen, I will track you down and we will have a different kind of conversation. We clear?" He released Morrison, who stumbled toward the door, face white. Crystal clear, did not mean any harm. They watched him mount up and ride away at speed, and only when he was out of sight did Owen turn to Eleanor. "Are you all right? Did he touch you?" Eleanor set down the poker with shaking hands. "No, he tried to come inside uninvited, but I had the poker. You got here just in time." Owen pulled her into his arms, and Eleanor went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and letting herself shake. His arms were solid around her, protective and warm. "I am sorry," he said into her hair. "I should have warned you about Morrison. He has a reputation for bothering women. I should not have left you alone. You could not have known he would come by." Eleanor pulled back enough to look up at him. "Besides, I handled it." He cupped her face in his rough hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "You did. You handled it like the strong, capable woman you are. But you should not have to. Not here, not in what is supposed to be a safe place." "It is safe," Eleanor insisted. "Because you make it safe, because you came back." They stood like that, holding each other until Eleanor's shaking subsided. Finally, Owen pulled back, though he kept one hand on her shoulder as though to reassure himself she was real and unharmed. "Something smells incredible," he said, clearly trying to lighten the mood. Eleanor laughed shakily. "Venison stew. I was trying to make something special. Mission accomplished. I am starving." He paused. "But first I need to put my horse up and check the perimeter. Make sure Morrison actually left and did not decide to lurk around causing trouble." He was gone for 20 minutes, and Eleanor used the time to compose herself and dish up supper. By the time Owen returned, she had the table set and the stew steaming in bowls. They ate quietly at first, but gradually conversation returned to normal topics. Owen told her about the trapline, the tracks he had seen, the marten he had caught. Eleanor told him about her day of cleaning and cooking, carefully omitting the Morrison incident until they had both finished eating. When they moved to the fire, Owen sat in his usual chair but pulled it closer to where Eleanor sat on the bench. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I called you my woman," he said without preamble. "When I was talking to Morrison, I should not have assumed. That was not my place." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, scarred from hard work and harder living. "What if I wanted to be your woman?" His grip tightened. "Kathleen, I do not want you making decisions based on fear or gratitude or feeling like you owe me something. That is not what this is." She turned to face him fully. "Owen, I have been on my own long enough to know my own mind. What I feel for you is not gratitude, though I am grateful. It is not fear, though you do scare me a little when you get that look in your eye like you did with Morrison." She smiled. "It is something I have not felt before, like coming home to a place I did not know existed." Owen pulled her off the bench and into his lap, and Eleanor went without hesitation. His arms encircled her, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Have been since the moment I saw you on that floor. I know it is fast, I know we should take this slow, but I have never been good at pretending I feel something other than what I do." Eleanor turned her face up to his. "Then do not pretend. I am falling in love with you too. Maybe I have been since you lifted me up and told me never again." He kissed her then, gentle at first, as though she might break. But Eleanor was not fragile, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and hope she had been carrying. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair, and she felt heat bloom through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." Eleanor laughed, caught between joy and disbelief. "You have not even courted me properly. We have been courting for weeks just without calling it that. Every meal we shared, every conversation by the fire, every moment I watched you make this place a home and you watched me try to be worthy of you. That was courtship, Kathleen. I love you. I want you as my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. Marry me." Eleanor knew she should think about it, should be practical and careful, and all the things a sensible woman would be. But her heart knew the answer before her head finished deliberating. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." His smile was like sunrise, transforming his entire face. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Eleanor felt herself melting into him. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing and holding each other and murmuring promises against each other's skin. Finally, Owen pulled back, his breathing ragged. "We should stop. I want to do this right. Want to marry you proper before anything else happens." Eleanor nodded, though her body protested. He was right, and she loved him more for his restraint. "How do we get married up here? There is a circuit preacher who comes through Wasco every few months. We can ride down to town and find out when he is due. Or if you want something bigger, we could wait and go to Sacramento. I do not need bigger. I just need you and me and someone to say the words that make it legal." Eleanor paused. "Although we should probably wait until after the first snow really sets in. I do not want to risk getting caught in a storm between here and town." Owen considered this. "You are right. It is early November now. We will probably have our first big snow in the next week or two. Once it comes and the trail is settled, we will head down to Wasco and track down that preacher." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming aloud. Owen told her about his hopes of expanding his trap lines, maybe taking on an apprentice in a few years when he got too old for the hardest work. Eleanor talked about wanting a vegetable garden come spring, maybe some chickens for eggs. "We could build a hen house on the south side of the barn," Owen said. "Good sun there and sheltered from the wind. I would like that. Fresh eggs would be wonderful." "What else do you want?" Owen asked, his hand stroking her back as she leaned against him. "For our life together, I mean. What would make you happy?" Eleanor thought about it. "Honesty between us, respect, partnership, maybe children someday if we are blessed." She looked up at him. "What about you?" "I want you safe and happy. I want to give you a good life, even if it is not an easy one. I want to grow old with you and know that every day I did my best to be the man you deserve." They eventually made their way to their separate rooms, though it took several more long kisses before they could bear to part. Eleanor lay in bed, too excited to sleep, her lips still tingling from Owen's kisses. In less than 24 hours, her entire world had shifted again, but this time toward joy instead of away from it. The big snow came a week later, starting as light flurries in the morning, and building to a full blizzard by afternoon. Owen brought in extra wood and checked on the animals, then secured the cabin against the storm. They spent 3 days mostly inside while the snow piled up outside, drifts reaching halfway up the windows. Eleanor had never been snowed in before, but she found she did not mind. The cabin was warm and well stocked, and Owen was good company. They played cards and read aloud to each other and talked about everything under the sun. They also stole kisses whenever the mood struck, which was often. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, leaving behind a world transformed. The snow was deep, nearly 3 feet on the level and much deeper where it had drifted. Owen strapped on snowshoes and went out to check on the animals and clear paths. Trail to town should be passable in a day or two, he reported when he came back in, stamping snow from his boots. If you are still set on getting married soon, I am definitely still set on it. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Eleanor made sure their warmest clothes were clean and mended. Owen checked over the horses and the pack mule, making sure they were fit for the journey. They packed supplies for what would likely be a 3-day trip. 1 day down to Wasco, a day in town to find the preacher and get married, and a day back up the mountain. They left at dawn on a cold, clear morning, the snow crunching under the horses' hooves. The trail was difficult but passable, and both horses were experienced at winter travel. Eleanor bundled in every warm layer she owned, and Owen had lent her a beaver fur hat that covered her ears. The journey down took longer than it would have without snow, but the weather held and they made good time. They stopped for a cold camp at midday, eating jerky and dried fruit while the horses rested. "You nervous?" Owen asked as they prepared to mount up again. "A little," Eleanor admitted. "Not about marrying you. About everything being real, I suppose, like if I blink it might all disappear." Owen pulled her close. "It is real. I am real. This is happening." They reached Wasco as the sun was setting, riding into the small town just as lamps were being lit in windows. The town was not much. A main street with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a church, and maybe 24 houses scattered around. But it was civilization, and Eleanor found herself slightly overwhelmed after months in the mountains. Owen secured them rooms at the hotel, paying for 2 even though Eleanor knew they would be married before they left town. She appreciated his continued respect for propriety. They cleaned up from the journey and met for supper in the hotel's dining room. The food was plain but hot, and Eleanor realized this was the first meal she had not cooked herself in months. "Tomorrow we will find the preacher first thing," Owen said. "With any luck, he will still be in town and can marry us right away." But luck was not immediately with them. The hotel owner informed them that the circuit preacher was not due back in Wasco for another 2 weeks. However, there was a justice of the peace who could perform legal marriages. They found the justice's house the next morning, a tidy place on the edge of town. Samuel Henderson was a grizzled man in his 60s who looked them over with shrewd eyes. "You are both of age and sound mind?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Owen confirmed. "I am 28. She is 19. You got anyone who objects to this union?" They both shook their heads. Henderson shrugged. "Then I see no reason not to marry you. Cost is $5 and you will need 2 witnesses. My wife can serve as one if you do not have your own." Owen produced a $10 gold piece. "Keep the change. We do not have witnesses, so if your wife and anyone else you can find would help, we would be grateful." 20 minutes later, they stood in Henderson's front parlor. Mrs. Henderson had produced a bouquet of dried flowers from somewhere, and the hotel owner had been recruited as the second witness. Eleanor wore her best dress, the blue one that brought out her eyes, and Owen had shaved and slicked back his hair. Henderson read from a worn book, the familiar words of the marriage ceremony. When he asked if Eleanor took Owen as her lawfully wedded husband, her voice rang out clear and sure. "I do." Owen's response was equally firm. "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of California, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Owen cupped Eleanor's face in his hands and kissed her sweetly, tenderly, while Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes and the hotel owner grinned. They signed the marriage certificate, their witnesses adding their names below. Owen folded the document carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. They were married, legal and binding and real. Mrs. Henderson insisted on giving them a wedding breakfast of eggs and bacon and fresh bread. They ate surrounded by the warmth of strangers' goodwill, and Eleanor felt emotion swell in her chest. Less than 3 months ago, she had been scrubbing floors for a cruel man with no hope and no future. Now she was married to someone she loved, someone who valued and respected her. They spent the rest of the day gathering supplies they would need. Coffee and sugar, fabric for Eleanor to make new dresses, ammunition for Owen, and a few small luxuries like peppermint sticks and a tin of tea. That night, as Mr. and Mrs. Owen Isaac, they shared a room for the first time. Eleanor had been nervous, but Owen was patient and gentle, and their joining was sweet and right and everything she had hoped it would be. They lay tangled together afterward, Eleanor's head on Owen's chest as he stroked her hair. "I love you, Mrs. Isaac," he murmured into the darkness. "I love you too, Mr. Isaac," she whispered back. They left Wasco the next morning and made the long climb back up into the mountains. The cabin looked especially welcoming when they finally reached it late in the afternoon, smoke from the banked fire still trickling from the chimney. Owen dismounted and reached up to lift Eleanor down. Instead of setting her on her feet, he held her close. "Welcome home, wife." "Home," Eleanor echoed, and knew it was true. The winter passed in a blur of contentment. Eleanor had never been so happy, had never known life could be this good. She and Owen fell into an easy partnership, each knowing their roles but willing to help with the other's tasks. He taught her to snowshoe and to identify animal tracks. She taught him to make proper gravy and to mend his clothes so the stitches did not pull. They talked for hours by the fire, learning each other's stories and histories. Owen told her about the war, the things he had seen and done that still haunted him sometimes. Eleanor told him about her childhood, her parents, the dreams she had carried before life got hard. And they loved each other with a passion that sometimes surprised them both. Owen was tender and fierce by turns, always making sure Eleanor felt cherished. She discovered her own capacity for desire, for wanting and being wanted. In late January, Eleanor began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be sure before telling Owen. He had been sharpening his skinning knives when she approached him one evening after supper. "Owen, I need to tell you something." He looked up, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. At least I do not think so." She took a breath. "I am fairly certain I am with child." The knife clattered to the table. Owen stood so fast his chair tipped over backward. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be. All the signs are there." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." Eleanor felt him trembling and realized he was crying. She pulled back enough to see his face, saw tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Happy tears," he assured her, seeing her alarm. "I am just so damn happy, Kathleen. I never thought I would have this. A wife, a family, a real home. I had given up on all of it." "Well, you have it now," she said, wiping his tears with her thumbs. "All of it and more." The next months passed quickly. Owen became absurdly protective, insisting Eleanor rest more and let him take on additional chores. She humored him when she could and ignored him when she could not. Knowing his protectiveness came from love. As spring arrived and the snow began to melt, they made plans. Owen wanted to expand the cabin, adding a proper bedroom on the first floor so they would not have to carry a baby up to the loft. They spent April and May working on the addition, Owen doing the heavy construction while Eleanor helped where she could. By June, they had a beautiful new room with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. Eleanor filled it with the few things they had been able to buy in Wasco: a cradle Owen had traded for, soft flannel for baby clothes, a rocking chair a neighbor had given them when he heard about the baby. Eleanor's time came in late August, during a thunderstorm that shook the cabin. Owen wanted to ride for the midwife who lived 5 miles away, but Eleanor knew there was no time. The baby was coming fast. "You have delivered animals," she panted between contractions. "How different can it be?" "Very different," Owen said, his face white with fear. But he did what needed doing, boiling water and gathering clean cloths. And when their daughter finally entered the world with a lusty cry, he caught her in his large, gentle hands. "It is a girl," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We have a daughter. They named her Rose Eleanor Isaac, and she was perfect. Dark hair like her father, blue eyes that might change color or might stay, tiny fingers that wrapped around Owen's thumb and held on tight." Owen proved to be a doting father, walking the floors with Rose when she cried, singing to her in his rough voice, marveling at every tiny milestone. Eleanor had never loved him more than when she watched him with their daughter, this big, tough mountain man reduced to putty by a baby's smile. 2 years later they had a son, Thomas Owen Isaac, who had his mother's brown eyes and his father's sturdy build. The cabin rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and Eleanor sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life. The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the growing family. Rose was followed by Thomas, then 2 years later by another daughter, Mary. Owen expanded the cabin twice more until it was a proper house with multiple bedrooms and even a small parlor. Eleanor's garden flourished and they did get those chickens, plus a milk cow and more horses. Owen took on an apprentice, a young man from Wasco who wanted to learn the trapping trade. Business was good and they were comfortable if not wealthy. But the true wealth was in the love they shared, the family they had built, the life they had created from nothing but hope and hard work and absolute devotion to each other. Eleanor sometimes thought back to that day, in September 1872, when she had been on her knees scrubbing Carmichael's floor with no hope and no future. She thought about the moment Owen had lifted her up and said never again, changing the course of her entire life with those two simple words. She had believed him, trusted him, and he had never given her reason to regret it. He had kept every promise he ever made to her and then some. One evening, when Rose was 10, Thomas was 8, and Mary was 6, they all sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The children were playing a game involving much giggling and running around. Owen sat in his chair with Eleanor on his lap despite her protests that she was too old for such things. "You are never too old for this," he said, his arms secure around her waist. Eleanor leaned back against his chest, watching their children play. "Did you ever imagine we would have all this?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Owen admitted. "I thought I would live and die alone on this mountain. Then you came into my life and changed everything. You changed everything for me too. Saved me, really." Owen turned her in his lap so he could see her face. "We saved each other. That is what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from loneliness, from giving up on the possibility of happiness." Eleanor kissed him, soft and sweet, while their children made exaggerated gagging noises in the background. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you too," he replied. "Never doubt that. Not for a single moment of a single day." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains and the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the darkening sky. The children eventually tired themselves out and came to sit with their parents, Rose leaning against Eleanor's legs while Thomas climbed into Owen's lap and Mary nestled between them. This was happiness, Eleanor thought. Not the absence of hardship, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. Not perfection, but partnership and commitment and choosing each other every single day. The years continued to pass. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who married a surveyor and moved to Sacramento, though she visited often with her own growing family. Thomas took over his father's trap lines, proving he had inherited Owen's skill in the wilderness. Mary surprised them all by becoming a teacher, opening a small school in Wasco. Eleanor and Owen grew older together, their hair turning silver, their bodies moving a bit slower, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They spent their days working side by side as they always had, and their evenings on that same porch, watching the same mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. On a warm evening in June 1898, 26 years after they first met, they sat in their customary spots. Eleanor's hands were busy with knitting, making booties for Rose's expected 5th child. Owen was working on a new carving, a bear for Thomas's son. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on the responsibility of a wife and family when you could have stayed free and independent?" Owen set down his carving and looked at her with those same blue eyes that had first captured her heart. "Not for one single second. You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was not free before I met you. I was just alone. There is a difference. I used to think I needed rescuing," Eleanor said softly. "That day you lifted me up off that floor, I thought you were my savior, my knight coming to save the poor maiden. But that was not really what happened, was it?" "No," Owen agreed. "What happened was two people who needed each other found each other at exactly the right moment. You saved me as much as I saved you. Maybe more." Eleanor reached out and took his hand, their fingers interlacing as easily as they had that first time 26 years ago. "I would do it all again. Every hard moment, every challenge. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "Same," Owen said simply. "Every damn time I would choose you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the first stars appeared. From inside the house came the sounds of Mary preparing supper. She had moved back home temporarily while the school was being rebuilt after a fire, and having her there reminded them of when the house was full of children's noise and energy. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Eleanor asked. "After you brought me here from Carmichael's?" Owen thought for a moment. "I told you a lot of things that night. You said you wanted to spend the winter with someone who did not hate you, that fair wages prevented resentment." "I remember. What about it?" Eleanor smiled. "I was thinking that you got much more than someone who did not hate you. You got someone who loves you more than life itself." Owen pulled her close, and even after all these years, Eleanor still felt that same spark, that same certainty that this was where she belonged. "Best bargain I ever made," he murmured into her hair. "Trading some flour and coffee for a lifetime with you." Mary called them in for supper, and they rose together, Owen's hand at the small of Eleanor's back as they walked into their home. The table was set, candles lit against the gathering darkness, and the smell of good food filled the air. As they sat down to eat, Eleanor looked around at the life they had built together and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to Carmichael's trading post on that September day in 1872. Gratitude for Owen's courage in standing up to Carmichael and taking her away from that place. Gratitude for every day since, the good ones and the hard ones, because they had all led to this moment. After supper, Mary excused herself to work on lesson plans, leaving Eleanor and Owen alone by the fire. Owen settled into his chair and pulled Eleanor onto his lap, just as he had been doing for over 2 decades. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Owen said, his voice reflective. "What is that?" "The moment I walked into Carmichael's and saw you on your knees. I remember feeling this rage, this absolute fury that anyone would treat another person that way. But underneath the rage was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like my soul knew yours before my mind caught up." Eleanor nestled closer to him. "I felt it too, even though I was terrified at first. There was something about you that made me feel safe. Even when I had no reason to trust any man ever again, I am glad you trusted me. Glad you took the chance." "Best decision I ever made," Eleanor said firmly. "Even when I was scared, even when I did not know what was going to happen, some part of me knew you were different, knew you meant what you said." They sat in the firelight, holding each other, remembering everything they had been through together. The early days of uncertainty and growing trust. The first time they admitted their feelings. Their wedding in Wasco. The birth of each of their children. The lean years when trapping was poor and money was tight. The good years when everything seemed to go right. All of it had woven together to create the rich tapestry of their shared life. "If you could go back," Owen said quietly, "and tell that girl on her knees scrubbing the floor what her life was going to become, what would you say?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I would tell her to hold on. That help is coming, that love is coming, that everything she has been through is leading somewhere better than she can possibly imagine. I would tell her that in less than a year, she will be married to her best friend, and in 2 years, she will hold her first child. I would tell her that she is stronger than she knows, and that her capacity for love and joy is far greater than her capacity for suffering." Owen's arms tightened around her. "That is beautiful. What would you tell yourself?" "The you that walked into that trading post." Owen thought for a long moment. "I would tell myself to trust my instincts. When I saw you there and knew I could not leave without you, part of me thought I was being reckless and foolish. I would tell that version of me that it was not reckless. It was the smartest thing I ever did. And I would tell myself to appreciate every single moment, because time goes faster than you think, and before you know it, your babies are grown and having babies of their own." They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the mountain night was alive with the sounds of wind in the pines and the distant call of an owl. Eventually, Eleanor stirred. "We should get to bed. Dawn comes early." "It always does." Owen agreed, but neither of them moved immediately. They were too comfortable, too content in each other's arms. Finally, they rose and banked the fire, checked the doors, and made their way to their bedroom. They had shared this room for over 20 years, and it held the accumulation of their life together. Photographs of their children, the quilt Eleanor had made from scraps of the kids' old clothes, Owen's rifle mounted over the door, books they had read together. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long marriage, moving around each other in the small space without collision. When they finally settled under the quilts, Eleanor curled into Owen's side as naturally as breathing. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he replied, his voice already thick with sleep. "Always have, always will." Eleanor lay awake a bit longer, listening to Owen's breathing even out as he fell asleep. She thought about that scared, desperate girl she had been, and the strong, confident woman she had become. She thought about the journey from that trading post floor to this warm bed, and how a single moment of courage from a mountain man had changed everything. She thought about their children, grown now and making their own ways in the world, but carrying with them the lessons of love and respect and partnership they had learned from watching their parents. She thought about grandchildren and great-grandchildren to come, new branches on the family tree she and Owen had planted together. Most of all, she thought about Owen, this good man who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to lift her up, who had promised her she would never scrub another floor on her knees, and had kept that promise every day since, who had given her not just a home but a partnership, not just security but love, not just a future but a reason to believe in happy endings. Sleep finally claimed her, and she dreamed of mountains and sunshine, of children's laughter and Owen's strong arms, of a life well lived and a love that would endure beyond their years. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Summer faded into fall, fall into winter, winter into spring. Eleanor and Owen grew older, but their love remained a constant, the bedrock upon which everything else was built. When Eleanor was 68 and Owen 77, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The cabin that had once seemed so remote was now the heart of a sprawling family. Everyone gathered to honor the love story that had started it all. Rose stood to make a toast, her own hair now streaked with silver. To our parents, who taught us that true love is not about grand gestures but about showing up every day and choosing each other. Even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Thomas raised his glass. To Pa, who showed me what it means to be a man of honor and integrity. And to Ma, who taught me that strength comes in many forms and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help when you need it. Mary, the youngest, wiped tears from her eyes. To Mama and Papa, who built a life from nothing but love and determination, and who proved that family is not just blood but choice and commitment and showing up for each other no matter what. Eleanor looked around at the faces of her family, each one precious, each one a testament to the life she and Owen had created together. Her heart felt so full it might burst. Owen stood, his body a bit bent with age but his spirit as strong as ever. I am not much for speeches, as you all know, but I want to say one thing. 50 years ago, I walked into a trading post and found a woman on her knees, and I knew my life was about to change. I did not know how or how much, but I knew, and I was right. Eleanor, you have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest love for half a century. You have given me more joy than any man deserves. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. He raised his glass. To my wife, the woman who changed everything. Everyone drank, and Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. She stood and went to Owen, and he folded her into his arms as he had done countless times before. I love you, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. From that first day to this one and every day in between and every day still to come, you are my heart. The party continued late into the night, but eventually the younger children were put to bed and the adults drifted off to the various rooms and outbuildings where they would sleep. Finally, it was just Eleanor and Owen again, alone in their bedroom. Quite a day, Owen said, settling into bed with a groan. Quite a life, Eleanor corrected, joining him under the quilts. They lay in the darkness, holding hands, two old people who had loved each other young and now loved each other old. Outside the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to their story. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not come to Carmichael's that day? Eleanor asked softly. Sometimes, Owen admitted. But it does not matter what would have happened, because what did happen is better than anything I could have imagined. We were meant to find each other, Kathleen. I truly believe that. So do I, she whispered. They drifted off to sleep together, hands still clasped, hearts still beating in rhythm after 50 years of partnership and love. Eleanor and Owen were granted many more years together, watching their family continue to grow and flourish. They saw grandchildren marry and have children of their own. They saw the wilderness around them change as more settlers came and towns grew larger and more connected. But through it all, they remained constants in each other's lives, the love story that everyone in the family held up as the example of what marriage should be. When Eleanor was 73, she fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Owen nursed her with the same tenderness he had shown when she gave birth to their children, sitting to her bedside day and night, refusing to leave her side. You are going to exhaust yourself, she scolded weakly. I have been exhausted before. I will survive. You just focus on getting better. And she did get better, because Eleanor was not ready to leave Owen yet. She had more living to do, more time to spend with this man who had been her whole world for over 5 decades. They made it to their 55th anniversary, then their 60th. By then, they were the oldest couple anyone in their family knew, a matched pair who seemed to draw strength from each other's presence. On a golden afternoon in September 1932, exactly 60 years after Owen had first walked into Carmichael's trading post, they sat on their porch watching the mountains. Eleanor was 81, Owen 90. Their bodies were frail now, but their minds remained sharp and their love undimmed. 60 years, Eleanor marveled. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 60 years of my life, Owen said. Every single day of them. Eleanor looked at her husband, at the face she knew better than her own, lined now with age but still so dear. Do you know what I am most grateful for? What is that? That you saw me. That day in the trading post, you could have just bought your supplies and left. You could have looked away from my suffering, told yourself it was not your problem. But you did not. You saw me, really saw me, and you did not look away. That changed everything. Owen reached for her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I could not have looked away if I tried. You were the answer to a question I did not even know I was asking." They sat in silence, holding hands as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The mountains stood eternal before them, the same mountains that had watched over their entire married life. "I am tired," Eleanor said eventually. "Me too," Owen admitted. "More tired than I have ever been." They helped each other inside and prepared for bed with the same care they always had, neither willing to burden the other more than necessary. When they finally settled under the quilts, they turned to face each other, mirroring positions they had taken thousands of times before.
"I love you, Eleanor Kathleen Isaac,"
Owen whispered in the darkness. "Thank you for 60 years of happiness." "I love you, Owen Michael Isaac," she whispered back. "Thank you for lifting me up and never letting me fall." They fell asleep holding each other, and sometime in the night their hearts simply stopped beating. The doctor would later say it was remarkable, unprecedented even. They had died within minutes of each other, as though neither could bear to exist without the other. Even for a short time their family mourned them, of course, but there was comfort in knowing they had gone together, that neither had to face the world alone. They were buried on the mountain they had loved, in a spot overlooking the valley with the peaks rising behind them. The headstone was simple: Owen Isaac 1844–1932, and Eleanor Isaac 1853–1932. Beloved husband and wife, father and mother, grandfather and grandmother, together always. But the true memorial to their love was not carved in stone. It was in the family they left behind: 3 children, 14 grandchildren, and 32 great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy of love and respect and partnership that Eleanor and Owen had modeled so perfectly. It was in the stories passed down through generations, about the mountain man who rescued a desperate woman from a cruel employer and found his soulmate in the process, about the woman who had the courage to trust a stranger and build a life with him in the wilderness, about 2 people who chose each other every single day for 60 years and never regretted it. Rose's granddaughter would eventually write a book about them, based on the journals Eleanor had kept throughout her life and the stories Owen had told his children. The book became a bestseller, and people all over the country read about the love story that started with 2 simple words: never again, because that was what true love did. It saw someone suffering and said, "Never again, you will never face this alone." It lifted people up and gave them hope and possibility and a future worth fighting for. It transformed lives and created legacies that echoed through generations. And somewhere on that mountain in California, in a cabin that still stood strong and sturdy more than a century after it was built, the love of Eleanor and Owen lingered like a benediction. Future generations of their family would visit that place and feel the peace of it, the rightness. They would stand where their ancestors stood and understand that they came from love, real and true and lasting. The story that began with a woman on her knees, scrubbing a floor, ended with 2 people who had lived a full, rich life together and passed on surrounded by the evidence of their love. It was not a fairy tale, because fairy tales are fiction, and this was real. It was messy and hard and beautiful and perfect in its imperfection. It was proof that sometimes, against all odds, love does conquer all. Not easily, not without effort, but truly and completely and forever. It was proof that one moment of courage, one decision to stand up for what is right, one choice to see another person's humanity, can change everything. Eleanor had been scrubbing that floor on her knees, hopeless and alone. Owen had lifted her up and said never again, and neither of them had been alone ever since. They had found each other, built a life together, and created a love story for the ages. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the world. And that was how a simple act of kindness in a remote trading post in 1872 rippled forward through time, touching lives and inspiring hearts for generations to come. Never again would Eleanor scrub a floor on her knees. Never again would Owen live a solitary life on his mountain. Never again would either of them doubt that true love exists, that soulmates are real, that happily ever after is possible for those brave enough to reach for it. Never again. 2 words that changed everything. 2 words that started a love story that would never truly end, because love like theirs lives on in the hearts and lives of everyone it touches. And in a world that can be harsh and cruel and unfair, that kind of love is a light that never goes out, guiding others toward their own happy endings. This was the story of Eleanor and Owen Isaac, and it was true in all the ways that matter. It was a story of rescue and redemption, of courage and commitment, of partnership and passion and enduring love. It was a story that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that love, real love, is always worth fighting for. And they lived happily ever after, together always, just as they had promised each other 60 years before when they stood before a justice of the peace in Wasco, California, and pledged their lives to each other. They had kept that promise faithfully, every day, until the very end. It was more than most people dared to hope for. It was everything they had both needed, even when they did not know they needed it. It was their life, their love, their legacy. And it all started the day a mountain man walked into a trading post, saw a woman on her knees, lifted her up, and said the two words that would define the rest of their lives together: never again.